Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friends, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Zach coming to you from Washington, D.C. And today we discuss running out of time, working with the video guy, and working with your mentor as a colleague, all on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. Woo. Yeah, hey, we got Zach, Steve, and me today, and welcome back, Zach. We missed you last week.
Yes, I'm sorry to have missed the lovely Ms. Katz.
Yes, the lovely Ms. Katz.
You know,
You're right about that. She was lovely and humble
is.
and knowledgeable and just one of the best interviews we've had.
That may have been one of the best interviews we've had. Yeah. I must tell you, I've heard from several listeners. They are raving about it, absolutely raving about that show. Excellent. Some said it was the best yet. It was a lot of fun. I must say, it really was a lot of fun. That was our episode 260, which was the last show of our fifth year. Right, we've done 5 years. How the hell did we do 5 years? That's crazy.
I don't know, Star Trek did. So, what's the difference?
Really? How about Happy Days?
I don't know.
I think
they jumped the shark in that show.
Literally.
That's right, literally.
Did you see the episode with Richie's older brother?
No.
It was like episode 1 or 2, then they wrote him out.
Right.
He just disappeared. We don't know what happened to him.
That's sad. Well, you know what I found out? I was watching a program on Seinfeld, and Elaine wasn't even a character in the first episode. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
They didn't have Elaine there. They wrote her in.
A different actor played his father in the first season, too.
That's right.
Really?
That's right. And a different actor played George's father as well. And they actually redid those scenes with George's father.
Yeah.
So anyway, who cares about that? Welcome everyone
We'll edit that out.
to our first episode of season 6, episode 261. Oh my God, 261! How many more years? Can we do another 260?
I think we do the full 20, just like Gunsmoke.
Do we get watches? I don't know.
I tell you, if we go the full 20, I will buy any Survivor or Rolex.
You'll buy what? Any Survivor? What?
Survivor or Rolex.
A Rolex.
Some of our retirement funds will be depleted by the 20-year mark.
Yeah. Zach will still be alive.
Right. I'll be working until I die.
Anyway, so let's get started with our 6th year, episode 261, and we're going to start off with some news. And leading off the news today was that amazingly dull Oscar presentation on Sunday night.
Yes.
Okay, wow.
People
Did you guys
forgot
watch
that
it?
there was 2.5 hours of Oscar show before.
That's right. And then 4.5 hours after. And we even had a World Wrestling Championship match during it. They fit everything in. It was amazing. I've never seen so many damn celebrities in my life. They had celebrities who had nothing to do with the movies there, just so that they can have them on the show. As a matter of fact, they had so many celebrities. I had read that they actually deleted like 4 categories. Celebrities, all praising themselves. It reminds you of the opening of All About Eve, which was terrific because it's in one of those sort of award type ceremonies. And the guy who's playing, what was the name? Addison, who was the critic, he's narrating over it. He's talking about the people that come to these award shows. I'm saying that's exactly right. It really is. But first of all, kudos to Mr. Bob Dickinson and Noah Mitz from Full Flood who did the lighting. And Bob, I think they should give Bob an Oscar. Because he's done how many shows? He's done like 40 years of this. It's a
lifetime achievement.
Well, the Oscars are only eligible for Emmys.
That's true. And actually, there's a really good article with a complete gear list located at livedesignonline.com. So check that out. David Corin designed a set, and it was really, really terrific work again.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job.
He did a great job, and there were a lot of embedded LEDs, and it was just beautiful. And it was, the whole thing had like this sort of a lounge setting with tables and sofas that came out into like the audience. But what they really needed was a mosh pit with security or a wall that separated the audience and the stage.
A pony wall.
Well, I actually wondered if part of that was driven by like looking for a sort of elegant solution for social distancing.
Oh, I didn't notice. People seem so close to each other.
Yeah, but like, you come with your group and your group sits at a table and you're making that choice, I suppose. The thing that I thought was really great about the set in general was that it just made for so many interesting backgrounds during the close-ups.
Right.
And that a lot of times when these TV things happen, when there's a close-up shot, you just kind of see a blur behind people. But this really had some like nice definition and nice contrast so that people really popped. And, and I thought that like the whole idea of the like camera iris motif was really interesting. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Oh, yeah, I agree. And I think the lighting was beautiful, great balance, great contrast.
Yeah.
Listen, you expect no less from Bob. He's
those guys are pros. And they're in a theater that was designed for this moment.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of it. It really was. Yeah. The problem with that set is that sitting in the front row was Will Smith. That was the problem. I just guess it's okay now to assault someone if you don't like what they say. And someone posted today on a Facebook page, like, I wonder if Don Rickles was doing his act today. I mean, it's crazy. It's totally nuts. I guess it's okay to do this nowadays. This is what we've come to. I mean, it's nuts.
What we've come to is that if you're famous, it's okay to do it.
Oh, is that what it is?
I mean, I'm not endorsing it, but I'm saying it's sort of like, they've said that after the moment happened, he was asked to leave and he said no. And then basically they're like, okay, we asked. If you're a famous celebrity, then you can say I was out of line and that's enough.
All I know is that he was laughing at that joke. And then he looked at his wife and she wasn't.
He got a different take on it.
You got a totally different take on it. And I'm certainly not apologizing for him or giving him excuses because there is no excuse for violence. But that kind of ruined the whole thing for me.
Right.
It really ruined a lot of the whole mood was shot at that point.
Right. We should go back to like the old fashioned opera days where if you didn't like it, you just threw rotten vegetables.
That's right. Vegetables would have worked a lot better. And I think Chris would have liked that better too.
Yeah.
But getting back, Bob Dickinson, great job. I looked at the equipment list. There was a lot of Verilites on that show. Did you check that out? I mean, a lot of VL5s. And there's a whole slew of other equipment too. So check that out on the Live Design Online website, and you'll get to see everything that they did. It's beautiful, beautiful. So Steve has our first question of the day.
Okay, it comes from Todd in Kansas. And Todd writes, I always seem to be running out of time at tech. What am I doing wrong? And how do you decide what to cut when in a similar situation? Well, the first thing is don't run out of time at tech. So either your tech schedules are too light on the amount of time you need, or you're not going into it prepped very well. You do say, I'm always running out of time. So, why are you running out of time? Are you, do you not have a plan? Are you slow at programming? Are you using moving lights and you don't want to pick any color until you get to the theater? I mean, there's some mechanical reasons here that you're probably running out of time that can be corrected. I don't think they're career ending. I think it's just, you're letting a few things slip away from you that you shouldn't let slip away from you. The discussion, though, about what do you cut at tech, that's a tricky one. I think what you cut at tech are probably bad ideas. You cut things that, just are not looking good rather than, no one wants you to cut something that looks great. So I think I would start there. I don't know. That's a tough one. What about you, Zach? You do video design, completely different world. But what do you cut at tech?
It is, but it's not. One of the things that I've come to realize over the last 20 or so years is that running out of time is like a state of mind, and that you're only running out of time if you've put a certain, set of rules or implications upon yourself that you can't achieve. And so what I would say is, if you feel like you're always running out of time, maybe take a more like global look at what's going wrong that is making you feel that anxiety that you've run out of time. Because maybe you're trying to do too much. Maybe you're, like as you're saying, maybe you're not showing up prepared enough. Or maybe you have unrealistic expectations of what you're going to be able to do. That happens a lot, especially when you work at different levels and scales. The crew for the Oscars is certainly going to work differently than the crew at regional theater on Long Island. So you need to go in there with expectations that are realistic for those crews of what you can achieve. And I would say the thing to cut is probably, like you said, the fat. Figuring out, what am I trying to do that's too much? A lot of times, even if you do have time, a complex design is not always the best design anyway, And so thinking about what are the things that make me the most anxious? What are the things that take me the most time to do? And then how do I reduce those elements? And that might mean less of those things. If it's a technical thing, like if I have too many projectors, do I really need that many projectors to accomplish what I'm trying to do here? Do I really need this media server to accomplish what I'm trying to do here? Am I working with a programmer I've never met? Should I have a conversation with that programmer before and say, this is how I normally work? Let's figure out a shorthand in advance. I think a lot of the idea of running out of time is just setting realistic expectations for yourself of what you can accomplish, conveying those to your collaborators and your director so that their expectations are also managed and they're not turning to you and saying, hey, can you do this or that, when you've already established that that's not going to be possible. I mean, the most dangerous thing you can do is set unrealistic expectations and accomplish them, because then everyone expects that every time.
The other thing I was thinking is that if you're kind of beginning your career, some things I notice is one doesn't take advantage of all the time that is at tech. So the director stands up and says, we need to stop for a few minutes. I'm going to talk to the set designer, or I want to work on this blocking a little bit. That's not time for you to sit back and have a cup of coffee and a donut. If you don't, you let the stage manager know what you're doing, and he or she will say, sure, let's go ahead and do that. But that's the time to be working on cues, to get ahead, or to go back and fix things, because you now have human beings standing on stage. So maybe it's a better use of time at tech. What about you, David?
Well, all this reminds me of a great Theron quote many years ago, when a lot of these huge shows were coming over from Europe to Broadway, and there were like 300, 400, 500 lights in the air, if you can fit that many on a Broadway stage. And she said, when do they have time to light the show? And who can focus all those lights so fast? I said this many times on the show. I'll just say it quickly. It's really important that you know how much time you have before you even agree to the show. How many days of load-in are there? How many hours of focus are there? If you only have 8 hours to focus a show, you're not going to hang 300 conventional fixtures. The three of us have been doing this for many, many, many years, and I can just speak to myself. If I have 8 hours to focus a show, there are not going to be more than 200 fixtures in it. Just not. And all that depends also, is it a flat floor? Are there platforms? Are there multiple sets? You have to fly stuff in and out. Is there a rake? If there's a rake, you're not going to be able to get it from a genie. So you're going to have focus tracks, some other method of getting up there, and that takes longer. So what you need is information. And the best information you can get is when you clarify with the production manager or technical director how much time you have to load in, and how much time you have to focus, and how much time you have to cue. Save yourself some misery and be simple about it. Be as simple as possible, and just realize what your limitations are. Okay, Jesse in Phoenix asks, how do you like to proceed when designing lights with a video designer? What is the design process from conception to opening? Well, I'm going to be really interested in hearing what Zach says about
Oh,
this.
boy.
But I just did a show for the Sibelius Academy in Helsinki and USC. It's this huge projection show where Sean Kowalty did the projections. I did the sets and lighting. And I can't do a show personally as a lighting designer without the projections being there. Going back from the very beginning, when you're talking about the show with the director and your colleagues, you really need to come up with some storyboards and ideas of what the projections are going to be doing. And again, it depends on what type of projections they are. In this case, they were sort of background projections, but they were brilliant. They're brilliantly designed. I must say it's some of the best work I've ever seen Sean do. It's beautiful, beautiful work. And both animated and still. Just fantastic. But when I light a show, I need those images there for me to light. I can't wait on them. Now, there's some, Sean had about 80% of the show already done, and he was able to, throw things up there. And for like the 20% that wasn't done, I fit things in, and then when they did appear during rehearsal, then I made adjustments. Also, in this case, in both theaters that we're doing the show in, you can see a lot of floor, so I paint the floor with light. And I really need to see what's up there on the screens so that I can connect the floor with the screens. And that's a big issue for me too. And that has to do with color and pattern and things like that. But yeah, all that's really super, super, super important. So I'm going to now kick this off right to Zach because I want to hear what he has to say about this.
Well, I think that I'm going to reflect back a lot of what you just said, because I think that in an ideal situation with myself as a video designer is working with a lighting designer where they are aware of our intentions and able to collaborate with us to achieve those. I'll give as an example, I just did a show with our friend Driscoll Otto, who lit it. And we had a few conversations about what the role of the projections would be in the show. And he saw some of the images that I was planning to use. And really, that was all the conversation we had to have, because at that point he knew, okay, so I have to support the images in this way. And I knew I need to support the lighting in this way. And we just sort of went forth and did it. And there was a little bit of discussion about, like, will you be able to have an image that goes to the bottom of the screen? No, I can't, because there's an orchestra sitting there and they'll be in front of the bottom 5 feet of the screen. And then he says, okay, I'm going to have a strip light at the bottom. And, you have an image that's tinted red. I can glow the bottom of the screen red, stuff like that. So we had a conversation about that. We had a conversation about the language of, like, when the images were literal and when there would be no images and why. And we went forth in that way. So I think a lot of that discussion that made things so successful was the discussion of what the intention of the projections was and the intention of the lighting, what we each wanted to achieve. And then we both took it upon ourselves in our pre-design work and our work during tech to help the other achieve those goals that they set out for themselves. So I would say that is a great place to start, when you're trying to figure out how to collaborate with others, is what is the role that my contribution is going to play, and how can we all support each other so that we each get to achieve that?
It's really difficult if the video designer and I are not on the same page. It is really difficult, because for me, we think about that. I'm lighting something on stage and I'm worried about the background and the foreground. Every image that shows up that is new to me, I'm starting my work all over again. So it's twice as much work for me. And I'm sure it's frustrating for the video designer too, to have an image pop up and they go, well, what's all this light turned on for? Are you going to fix it? So this load-in discussion, this collaboration that happens weeks, months in advance is really vital.
Yeah. And I would say one thing to keep in mind, if the intention is creating sort of this seamless world on stage where lighting and scenery and video blend together, as opposed to if it's intentionally like a video moment so to speak, that you shouldn't be afraid as the video designer, nor should you be afraid as the lighting designer to have a conversation in that moment. Like, hey, can you kick that a little more into the direction of what I'm doing so that we blend together better? I think that especially in the video world where, you rarely see what you're going to see on stage until the exact moment when you're in tech, that we have a tendency to sort of put our heads down and get buried in our computers and our media servers and our content and not ever think to look up and wonder if like my magenta matches your magenta and should we have a conversation about that? And the answer I would always say is yes, you should, and no one should be offended.
Exactly. And that's really what you're doing. You are connecting those colors. You're trying to make a seamless atmosphere. I think that's the most difficult thing for lighting designers, to incorporate the projections and incorporate the lighting, adjust the lighting so that it sort of creates a three-dimensional world of color and pattern. Now, there are times when you're going to want a contrast for effect. Absolutely. But I think that it's really important to reach that point to be able to do that. And in order to do that, you need to have time, and the projection designer needs to have time. I knew that Sean needed several days in the theater without me there, just so that he can make sure that the mapping is correct, make sure that everything is fine, and he set up the media server, all that. I'm sure that was done in advance, knowing Sean. But he needed several days. And as it turned out, I was able to give him like 3 or 4 days in the theater without me. I didn't even show up yet. And when I showed up, I was able then to have all those projections there. I was able to have 80% of the projections there. It was fantastic.
No, that's great.
And you just need to organize that from the start. If you're battling time in the theater, you only have 3 days to do lighting cues and projections. Yeah, you're going to have to figure out how to work over each other, but it's not nearly as efficient as if you have some more time. So make sure you say, this is a huge projection show. We need to give Zach 7 days in the theater.
Ooh, thank you so much.
That's right, I know. And that's very expensive, but I'm sorry. If you have projections, it's not only the equipment and the design fee, it's the time. You can't just think you're going to fit projections in over lighting and over everything else. It makes everybody's life much more difficult.
Yeah.
But boy, that's in the perfect world. We're all working in Europe when they have the time.
Sure. And speaking of working together in tech, Nikki in St. Paul writes, can you discuss how you like setting up your production table space? So this is definitely a favorite topic of mine because I have done things, from having, what we call confidence monitors up the wazoo to having like a full-on coffee and tea station at my tech table. Depending on the amount of time and the amount of socializing we want to do. I think that sort of the key to any production table space is having it organized so that anything you need, you can find pretty much right away. Everybody has their own little quirks. Like I like to have certain types of snacks or, this or that or water or whatever brand of products you want. But I think like having a place so that if someone says, page 36 in the script, that where your script is first and foremost is an important thing at your tech table. So, being organized in some way, I think is a pretty important way to approach it.
I do have a tea service set up, and I love it. And, for me, besides the little light there, I have a lava lamp going. Nice. It puts out a lot of light, and it's not too obtrusive, and it's not too glaring, and it's not hard on my eyes, so I use a lava lamp a lot. I've gotten to where I really, I'm always taking notes. So I have gotten to where I've started having my tech table wrapped in brown paper. And so I just write right on the table. Because half the time I'm standing up or I'm in front of it or I'm behind it. So I need some place to write. So I'm always doing that. Then each night they peel away the brown paper and we get the notes off there.
Right.
But I agree with you. I think the most important thing is knowing where your script is, knowing where your magic sheet is, being able to quickly access those and see what you're doing.
People who listen to the show know that I'm kind of quirky when it comes to production tables. We've had margarita to-go machines on there. We've had solar-powered garden gnomes. We had little monkeys that play songs. Just crazy stuff. Because I come from a quirky mentor, Gilbert Hemsley, who believed that the tech table needs to be a very inviting place. And he loved food there. He loved flowers, fresh flowers on the tech table, because it is really the place of high stress and it needs to be an oasis. So I believe in that, and I think that's really important. Now let's talk about some practical things. I set up my tech table very specifically depending on the show, how many moving lights I have, how many magic sheets I have to look at. All my magic sheets are on computers, either on my laptop or on my iPad. I bought one of these big 13-inch iPad Pros, which is great. And I have that set up, and there may be a video monitor with another magic sheet on it that's coming from the board. And there's obviously a cue list on there, so I'm going to have at least 2 video monitors coming from the board. And I have my script usually on a laptop and my cue list on a laptop. So I'm monitoring the cue list, I'm writing cues, things like that. And it needs to be comfortable. You need to be in a comfortable seat. You need to be high up so you can see the stage really clearly, because you want to be looking over all these bright objects on your table. And also, what I've found out, I'm standing a lot. I stand a lot when I light because I really want to just be focused in on the stage. But one important thing that what Steve was talking about just reminded me of something, a very important point. I like to be at the end of the table because I need to get out. Sometimes I need to get out to look at something that you can only see or check something from the right side of the stage. So I need access in and out of the aisles. So I don't mind people on one side of me. Obviously, my assistants are going to be on one side, and maybe the board op is going to be there, and the director maybe behind me, or sitting right next to me, and then my assistants. It just depends. But I like to have a clear passage out, because I'm too old now to be hopping over seats because I'll kill myself. So, just be practical and be organized. What's really interesting? I remember Pat Collins. I saw Pat Collins light a show at the Dallas Opera, and the tech table actually ran about, 30 feet across the row. And she had light plots, full-size light plots on every 4 feet. And each light plot represented the lights that she'd be using in that scene or act. And when that scene was over, her and her assistants would move down about 4 feet to the next light plot. And I thought that was really interesting that she actually did this.
That.
And I said, wow, and that's kind of cool. So everybody's different. But don't be afraid to tell the electricians, listen, I want my table here. Theron, she used to light from the balcony a lot of times so she could see the floor. She also said that she could smoke up there without anybody hassling her. And sometimes it keeps you away from crazy directors. But she used to like lighting from the balcony, not for every show, but for several shows. It just depends on what your needs are. Just tell them where you want the board and where you want the production table.
All right. You are listening to Light Talk, and today we are sponsored by...
No more 10 out of 12s. Well, the summer festival season is upon us, and that means mosquitoes. Those pesky little bastards can make an LD's life miserable. But what can you do? Sprays are stinky and stain your clothes. Well, the good folks at No More 10 out of 12s recommend the following 3 steps. Number 1, mosquitoes hate bubbles. Just plug in 3 or 4 bubble machines near the console. The only thing mosquitoes hate more than bubbles are bubbles scented with Victoria's Secret bombshell perfume. You will smell great and the mosquitoes will stay away. Number 2, mosquitoes love carbon dioxide. So, load up your stage crew with heavy beer drinkers, pregnant ladies, and just fat and out-of-shape people. With all that heavy breathing going on, backstage will look like a mosquito all-you-can-eat buffet. But maybe this doesn't work. Well, there is one final solution. If there are no large people, pregnant women, or bubble machines to act as your natural mosquito deterrent, a pet pig will work just as well. Mosquitoes always go for the highest body temperature, and Porky's a few degrees warmer than you. Tie him up near the console and watch him suffer. And as a bonus, if your tour ends in Texas, well, hell, goodbye, Porky. Hello, barbecue. This has been a public service announcement from No More 10 out of 12s.
That's funny.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sounds of those rabid ducks means that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about dealing with students in crises. And this is, obviously aimed at educators, but I think that if we're dealing with assistants also, because they're kind of our students as well, I think this will relate to everybody who's dealing with younger people and what's going on today in the world, and also with the pressures that everyone's hitting, especially during production, and especially during times and when it comes to students, at the midterm times when they're really tired and really stressed, and of course finals and things like that. So Steve and I, we've been teaching for a long time, and Zach, you've taught some students as well, and I'm sure you've dealt with younger people, especially with your assistants. So what are the techniques you use when you see a student in crisis? Steve?
Well, so there's two types of crisis. So the first type of crisis, I can't do anything about. But I see you're having some difficulties, personal difficulties, mental difficulties. There's something just not quite in step with who you normally are. Most universities, and SMU is no different, have health clinics on campus. And so I send my student to the health clinic. And I know that seems cold and callous, but I can't help them in that world. And they can go to the health clinic and they can ask to see a doctor. They don't have to stand in the lobby and say, well, I'm having suicidal thoughts today. They go and see a doctor, and it is private, and the doctor starts helping them find a way to become better. So that's an easy crisis. I push that off to a professional who's trained to do it. The more difficult crisis is, I think, the stress and pressure of being in school, that being at a tech, designing their first show at a new theater. I have only a graduate program. So students come to me from being fairly successful as an undergraduate. Now they come into a new environment and no one knows them. All of a sudden they're starting over again, and they're having to make that kind of real effort to trust people that they don't really know, to demonstrate that they do have skills, and it is very hard. So I think one of the things that I encourage people to do is be verbal, talk. Tell me what is going on. Tell me what the problem is. If you're trying to contain it, it's going to get to one of our questions about mentors. If you're trying to figure out everything by yourself and not ask the faculty or staff, or for that matter, the other members of your cohort for help, it's going to be a long journey, I think, through 3 short years as a graduate student. But mostly, I guess, in a short answer, is to try to make an environment that is as safe as we can make it, and help you through difficult times. I mean, no one wants to look like an idiot. No one wants to have a bad light cue on stage. And when those things do happen, you have to say, well, it's a learning process. Learn from that odd cue. Learn from that awkward thing you just said to the director, and move forward. I don't know. It's an interesting question and a hard question. David or Zach, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a mental health issue, I agree with Steve. You just got to get them to a professional, and because we're not professionals and we shouldn't be dealing with that. But if it's a situation where it's just pressure on schools and they're in crisis and maybe they're not getting their homework done or their projects done because they're spending too much time in the theater, if you explain to them why they are expected to meet their deadlines and to be able to adjust their time. And I hate using the word multitask, because multitask is not exactly what we do. We're not doing it at the same time. We're basically scheduling our time so that we can do multiple tasks. But that's a skill, and that's something they should learn in school. Whether you're a graduate student or an undergrad student, learning how to schedule your time and time management is so important, because We're working on multiple shows all the time. When a young student is first learning how to do all this and they've got priorities, they have to realize that you can't have 100% priority on a show on stage and let everything else fall apart. And I've argued this for years with other faculty that we should keep those requirements. Yeah, if a student is in crisis, yes, then you pull some stuff out. Okay, absolutely. Okay, listen, don't worry about my project next week. Just let's get this done and focus on this because you're having a hard time dealing with it. Then we'll talk about it later and talk about techniques for time management that works for you. And I think that's really super, super important. But you need to communicate. And communication is everything. And understanding is everything. Because a lot of people, and I deal with this now with the demographics of my students at Cal State, Long Beach, is that a lot of these students are, they have jobs, they support their families. And I'm not talking about grad students, I'm talking about undergrads. Some of them are in crisis, their families are in crisis. Some of them are homeless. It's a whole range of challenges that these young people have to deal with. And then having to deal with school as well and productions, it's a lot. It's a lot. So I just think that as teachers and as mentors, whether it's in a professional situation or in an educational situation, we have to understand where our students and our assistants are coming from and try to help them. Zach?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say I'll give you guys a slightly different perspective, which I think is really interesting. Being the child of a career high school drama club teacher, I saw early on that, the people who grow up to do what we do, starting back in as early as junior high, we were the kids that didn't totally fit in everywhere else. And we sort of found each other and created this incredibly supportive community. And I think that as I've gone on to teach at the undergrad and graduate level, that I've seen that elements of that carry on all the way up to our adult lives, that, we're still this small collective, that, this school within a school, so to speak. And that it's important to be able to turn to your colleagues or your community and look to support from them. And I think that you'd be surprised. One of the things that I have found is that when you get to the point where you feel like I can't get support from my community, or I'm too scared to ask for support from my community, that's usually the time when you're ready for professional help, and that your community is not going to be able to provide the help that you need. And the sort of the flip side of it is for us as teachers and mentors, modeling behavior for these kids to show them, we just had a humorous joke about the 10 out of 12 thing, but that for a very long time, the culture of the business of theater was like, we're people who can handle ridiculous hours, and we're people who can handle gruff attitudes, and that we can go be in tech until 12 o'clock at night and then go out drinking for 3 hours. And that the reality of it is maybe those are unhealthy perspectives, and that part of what we can do to help model how to approach the career part of our job with sanity is to say it's okay not to do some of those things. And maybe we should only work 8 to 10 hours, and we shouldn't, have this sort of white male dominated attitude in our workplace and things like that. And that being able to model and create a safe space for other people in that environment to feel comfortable doing what they, expressing themselves. Because, in a lot of ways, what we're doing is a very vulnerable thing. We're like expressing our innermost thoughts through our art. I mean, there may be millions of dollars worth of technology in between our heart and what's on stage. But really, we're to do your best work, you have to be able to open up your heart and your soul to be able to get your art out there. and you want to be safe, feel safe being able to do that. But I also think, having realistic expectations and like the questions that we answered today about, running out of time in tech and all those kinds of things, like figuring out, what is causing the crisis that I'm in? Is the crisis that I always run out of time in tech? And how do I make sure I don't do that again? Is the crisis that, I'm working on a play that's brought up issues about my family? Something happened to me when I was a kid. How do I deal with that? Or is the crisis just like, I have too many things going on. I have not enough things going on. I don't know what's going to happen next. Talk to somebody and get some other perspectives. I'm a big advocate of group therapy type scenarios. I think that it's the best way. The second best way, the best way you can learn, is always trial by fire in my mind. For a lot of things. But the second best way is find a peer and say, how did you do this? How did you get through this situation? What was your solution? I think you'll find, especially if you're a student, that there are going to be lots of people who can help support you through that.
That was great.
Well said.
Very well said. Very well said. Well, Steve has the last question of the day.
And it is from David in Israel. Is it possible to become a colleague of your mentor? Boy, that's a tough one. So is it possible? Sure, yes. It has to be the right working conditions. But it will be hard. Both of you have to kind of create a whole new set of rules. This is the same thing. Is it possible for a graduate to go back and teach at the college they learned at? I mean, it's hard. Some people will always think of you as a student. Some people will never give you credit for what you've achieved. So is it possible? Yes. Is it difficult? Yes.
I would say sometimes it's difficult. I mean, I think I absolutely agree that there are going to be some people that always see you as whatever role in life you were when they first met you. You're always going to be so-and-so's assistant or that student or whatnot. And what you have to do as the designer is say, that's their hang up. That's not my problem. I'm no longer that person's assistant, but if you're going to look at me like that, then fine, whatever. I think that in many ways, as we go through the sort of apprenticeship phase of our careers where we're assistants and then associates and then designers, that it's almost natural to sometimes become colleagues with some of your mentors. There's different levels of mentorship too. I mean, like my relationship with Wendell Harrington is very different than my relationship with Ken Billington. Ken Billington was someone who, as I was an assistant and an associate, I'd work on a show that he was also lighting, and every now and then he'd give me some advice, and it was great, and I appreciated that. And then eventually we would work on things together, and he was totally cool with seeing me as the designer. There was no hang up there. But it's a different level of mentorship than Wendell Harrington, who is like a second mother to me in many ways. And we have gone on to also, because we have that level of trust in that sort of mentorship, I think it's in some ways it's been easier for us to collaborate on things together because we have that relationship and that intimate knowledge of what she knows and what I know and what we bring to the table and how we would work together. But yeah, it definitely is drag when you see somebody that you're like, I've done 10 shows with this guy and he still thinks that I'm so-and-so's assistant. That's the worst.
When I was at SMU and I was working with Chris Barreca, we used to tell our students all the time was that we're really looking forward to the day where after 3 years and that student graduates, we become colleagues. We're no longer a mentor-student, but we're now colleagues. I've worked with some of my former students, and I have always treated them as colleagues and certainly not as students. I think it's just what happens, okay? I think we're all learning constantly, but that doesn't mean you're going to have a classic teacher-student role all the time. You're both colleagues, and you're learning from each other, and that is cool. And I've learned a lot from my students, let me tell you.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, there's a difference between being colleagues and friends, okay? Some people think that you have to be a friend to be a colleague. You do not have to be a friend to be a colleague. So I don't know if this question was about can you be friends with your former teacher or mentor. Yes, you can, but that's not necessary to actually be a colleague. So there you go.
Agreed.
Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tells us that once again you spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, YouTube, livedesignonline.com, Amazon Prime Music, and just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the law firm of Fleck, Flock, Flair & Claire and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Washington, D.C., and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when we chat about some more useless things and explore the crazy shenanigans in our industry.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
Bye-bye.